Hey, this is Sabrina Monarch bringing you the astrology forecast for July 15th to July 21st, 2020. And in preparation for this forecast, I have been noticing an increased dynamic of emotional need. So when I just look at the news or my news feed or my timeline, there is a massive more than normal amount of personal crisis and people going through it, whether they are in the midst of it and they're live broadcasting, or they are saying that they went through something and here's what I learned and here's how I'm helping you, which is evolutionary, by the way. This whole industry of self-development, from like a evolutionary perspective, this is part of the deeper drive within a species to discover answers to problems and share that information. So whenever we encounter information that really helps us and we pass it on, that is contributing to survival. There's a deep primal quality of that. So yeah, you may have an urge when you discover some kind of wisdom or you make it through a difficult passage, you might want to help guide other people. So there's this increased amount, and this is also when we look at just the global situation and a pandemic and a racial justice movement, there's a good amount of insecurity and upheaval and fear and trauma and all of these things coming up. And this is just in the macro, and we're all influenced by that. But even at the micro layer, however influenced or not it is by that, a lot of people are having emotional activations and really going through it. And when we're going through it, we want help, right? So I have noticed in my own life that I have needed more emotional support and I've had to reach out to people more. And I've also noticed the joy that I take out of helping other people. It's what I do as my career, but also for my friends. I love to help people. And I analyzed this. I went so deep into it that I even went back, like literally, I would say like 200 million years. I have to check that number. But this is a book called Religion and Human Evolution. And it traces the behavior of mammals caring for each other and how this is part of our evolutionary makeup, that we care. And this is something that I'm exploring in this week's astrology with the sun in Cancer. Cancer is a very caring sign, opposite Pluto and Capricorn. And so there's this primordial dynamic with Pluto. And I'm going to jump into my notes that I'm going to share with you. So basically on this channel, I've been writing weekly forecasts at monarchastrology.com for 5 years now. I'm starting on my 6th year now. And I recently moved over to YouTube, and I basically read you what I've written and add some extra commentary. So that's why I'm looking at my phone to talk to you all. So let me pull up my slides. And this is also to say that if you like to read your astrological content, you can always find a written copy of these forecasts at monarchastrology.com, and the link to that is in the notes. So, would it be Cancer season if we didn't go on talking about some tender themes and emotions and being emotional? This week, the transits point to the intersection of care and evolution. I'm going to share some thoughts on how care is wired into our animal body and instincts. And I also want to take a moment to discuss here how care is evolutionary in this lifetime in terms of the ways that it allows us to develop. In a supportive environment, we get to flourish. And when there's not support, there may be parts of us that are latent. So when the environment is good, we bloom, essentially. We might be blessed with this environment already, or in some facets of our lives at least. We've been taken care of sufficiently. We have what we need sufficiently. While in other areas of our lives, we are intentionally cultivating that nest that we need. I brought into this forecast some research I'm currently doing through a book, Religion and Human Evolution by Robert Bellah, which I'm developing into a talk for a summit that I'll be taking part of soon in August. It wasn't until writing this forecast and including some of this research that I made a lot more significant connection between care and a deeper instinctual urge for intimacy. So I actually had like a pretty big intellectual and personal expansion this week. If you know me, if you follow me, like I often talk about books or information that changed my life because my life changes every day. It should, right? But like I am always tapping into highly potent information and just having like mental transformations because of it. So this book by Robert Bellah, I have called Psychedelics as a book. I'm getting a lot out of it, and I'm so excited to continue to develop some ideas about astrology that are synthesizing some of the things that I'm learning from this text. But back to our astrology with the Sun in Cancer opposite Pluto and Capricorn, and this sense between care, so Cancer, and this deeper instinctual urge for intimacy, Pluto. Because it's Pluto, and Pluto is such a deep and tricky and sticky and complex and shadowy archetype related to transformation and power, it's also had me think a lot about the primal dynamics and the power dynamics of emotional vulnerability and the ways that we honor this very deep gateway. So I have collected some personal anecdotal thoughts to share on these themes, and then we'll get into the transits as usual. So here goes. Earlier in the year, I had become very curious and concerned that I'm not really like a crier. I don't cry that much. And even though I have processed my emotions and have grief and things like that, I couldn't just get myself to cry on demand, which I don't know, like, if that's even something that matters, right? But I think some people, can just cry at will, and they have access to that emotion when they want to call upon it. And I wanted to have more access to that. And I won't get into why really, but it was something from deep within me of like, this should, I want to work on this. So a few months ago, I had the experience of being provoked pretty skillfully by a leader of a workshop, and I really trust this person. And I ended up ugly crying uncontrollably in front of a group of people, which for me is kind of like a nightmare realized. And then afterwards, it wasn't so bad, but it was, I couldn't stop crying. And the group detoured and became focused on me for a little while, which it didn't have to happen that way. That was props to the facilitator for being able to hold that experience and work with it and not just be like, okay, you go take care of yourself, kind of thing, like, but to actually center the whole experience on it, which was even more overwhelming for me. It gave me a flashback to elementary school and how I learned early on how to hold my tears back, how to swallow them, mostly because, of this distorted feeling of the whole room kind of becoming like a fisheye camera lens and everything closing in on me and it feeling like everyone's looking at me. And deciding in this unconscious, just like early place in life that my way of coping with that intensity of outburst was to just like, bottle it down. And I know how that expresses in my natal chart and all of that. But for those several months since that uncontrollable, ugly crying event happened, I have had more access. So it opened Pandora's box. So I've been able to cry more. And I've been contemplating ever since, in a new way, the energetic gateway that tears are. And even though I've taught this, even though when it comes to the Cancer and Capricorn axis, one of the images that I use is Cancer is cardinal water. So it's like a waterfall, an upstart is cardinal and water element. So bursting into tears, and how the Capricorn can come in to either facilitate and hold space for that, or maybe sometimes it's the space and the facilitation that allows those tears to emerge. Either way, But Capricorn can also have a controlling energy or a stuffing energy or a repressing energy. So it can be, if you want to see Capricorn Cancer axis at play in an environment, it's watching how people react to other people's tears. Is it like handing them a tissue and it's like, they're there now, like, you know, wipe them away? Or is it like, you know, go ahead, cry, like let it all out? Like there's many different ways that we can respond, right? So tears as an energetic gateway, that literally when someone cries in an environment, the environment changes. Energetic gateway, both as the emotional release for the one that is crying, and also the way that the environment instinctually responds to it and changes. So in all of this, I learned that I had this false belief at play that being messy or being that emotional would reduce the amount of love in my life, that I wouldn't get the love that I was seeking, that I wouldn't get the belonging that I was seeking, and, you know, suppressed it instead to not reveal that level of emotion, that particular kind of emotion. And that's part of why I like opened the gate back up, was because I intellectually felt that that probably wasn't true. And I've since discovered and been way more sensitive to, both in my experience and watching real life situations or fictional situations in media, that actually when people display signals of their distress, it becomes an invitation for other people in the environment to become supportive, loving, and caring. So how will I wrap that up? Basically, I have realized from that that I don't need to be judgmental of that kind of emotional messiness, which is basically, you know, extreme Cancer is just like pure emotion, can't do anything, can't get out of bed. And Capricorn is the one that's like, okay, get it together, go to work, figure it out. And these forces can be polarized sometimes, and they don't have to be. There can be a synthesis between them. Now, another way to look at this is that Capricorn's ability to withhold can be a way of having boundaries. So maybe you've learned that if you process your emotions with someone, it can be an invitation for deeper connection with them. And maybe there's someone that you literally never want to talk to again, and so you're not going to keep processing stuff with them. And realizing that sometimes it is being withholding, which is what Capricorn does, of emotion that can sever a connection if that is what you are desiring. On another note, because we're looking at Pluto, there is this quality of which a person's vulnerability, such as tears, can be a gateway for erotic feeling in the person who is like playing the role of the protector, who comes in that kind of way. Damsel in distress, protector, axis, you know, regardless of gender. And that this may not necessarily be the kind of care that a distressed person is asking for. And so there is this vulnerability, and let's say there's no connection present already, or an established relationship, that in the moment that someone is extremely vulnerable, there's a responsibility perhaps in the environment to truly care for that person and to not overstep. And one way to think about that is focusing on what the person who is in distress needs versus having an agenda or making an assumptions. And Pluto is an archetype of power dynamics, so it can relate to empowerment and also abuses of power. So that's where my mind went that way. And why I've shared all these things is that I think it's highly likely, with the transits happening this week, that there is a pronounced dynamic of emotional need and caregiving, whether you should fall on either side or on both sides of being the more emotional one or being the one who is providing some kind of support. I know that I just go back and forth between the two. It's a soap opera up in here. So let's see, what did I write here? It's this opposition of the Sun in Cancer to Pluto and Capricorn that suggests this. This transit can relate to emotional transformations that happen within relationship because it's an opposition. So this is a aspect that has to do with relationship oftentimes. And that this dynamic of increased vulnerability and emotional caretaking and whatnot can be really life enhancing in the context where there is trust present. This energy might very well literally be erotic in contexts that support that, as Pluto does connect with Eros. Regardless, it's instinctual life force energy. And as I get into some of this research about the evolution of mammals, you'll see more of what I'm talking about, of how literally primordial it is to be emotional and to take care of one another. So before I get into this week's transits in more detail, I want to share a few announcements. Where did it go? It's this one. Okay. So I'm running a Kickstarter to fund a year ahead of astrology forecasts, which are these, the ones written at monarchastrology.com, as well as that I bring over here onto YouTube, and Magic of the Spheres podcast episodes. And you all have helped me get to my minimum funding goal of 7,000. So this project is funded, and I'm really grateful for that. And you can still pledge, however. There's 15 more days to go. We're at 72 backers, and my goal is to have 200. And I'm offering a lot of really exciting things, astrology downloadables that are super insightful and packed with information. I'm not one for brevity, as you probably know, if you know me, and astrology readings, as well as discounted tuition to 2 of my upcoming courses, which I will tell you about. Oh, the images aren't here, so I'm just going to stay here. The courses are Online Presence as Performance Art, which is a new class where I'm helping you have a more magical and fun relationship with the internet, learn how to come across, like how to message yourself, and how to overcome some of your deeper psychological fears about showing up on the internet and having a public presence, and tuning into the enchanted possibilities of what it would mean to have a more life-enhancing relationship with this tool. There's a lot of negative programming and stories that go around about the internet being this soul-sucking, isolating place, but it's also a place of connection. So the more that we have an intelligent relationship with the internet, the more that we're going to get out of this tool. And if you have a reason to exist publicly on the internet, like you have a message to share, you're a visionary, you're a creative, you're a spiritpreneur, you're a business person, your clients are people that you connect with virtually, or perhaps your advertising or marketing happens virtually. Whatever it is, if there's a reason for you to develop a more enhancing relationship with the internet, I want to help you do that. So the link to that course is in the notes as well, but you can get it at the lowest ever price through the Kickstarter. And then my Evolutionary Astrology Intensive is an amazing experience. It's like 4 months of a course, and it's to help you really have that click where you personally get astrology. You have a personal relationship with it. The way that I teach astrology is to really bring it into your own relationship with real experiences that you've had. So it's really grounded and embodied in your own wisdom and your own lived experience, but you simply gain access to this language. Dane Rujar says that astrology is a language, and when you speak this language, the sky speaks to you. So the way that I like to think about it right now is like, no one has to teach you what the color red is. You know red, and you can see it. You can see different shades of red. So once you know Jupiter, and you know Jupiter in the same way that you know the color red, you can see Jupiter in its many variety of manifestations. And opening up to this kind of archetypal consciousness not only makes you a more wise person and gives you access to more options of how to participate with reality, but it opens up the capacity for you to understand whatever the current drama of the sky is at any given moment, or what it is in your natal chart. This course has gotten a lot of really positive reviews. It's been a high impact course. So if you check out the course page, you'll learn all about what evolutionary astrology is. It's a Pluto focused astrology, and you'll see testimonials from students who have run through this course. Okay, and let's talk about our week. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to say is that please like this video, subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, and leave me a comment. Let me know what resonates with you from this forecast. I'd love to hear from you. So July 15th, 2020, the sun in 23 degrees of Cancer will be opposite Pluto retrograde in 23 degrees of Capricorn, and this happens at 12:12 p.m. Pacific. The artist of this image is Helise Wen. So given that Cancer and Capricorn are an axis of care, and Pluto is so primordial and evolutionary, I want to share some thoughts on the deeper instinctual drives that come from wanting to offer or receive care and/or protection. So from this book, Religion and Evolution, that I have been gushing about, I want to read some passages, and this is from a section exploring the evolution of care and love in organisms, specifically mammals. And he's quoting research by a name I can't pronounce, sorry. But the origin of love he finds in parental care, which unites the parents with their offspring and is clearly excellently united in reinforcing the bond between adults. We drew attention to the fact that animals that care for their young have formed closed groups. So society literally has emerged from care. That's what closed group means, community, society, etc. That's what it has evolved into, at least, as well. They do it all by means of behavior patterns of cherishing, which originate from parental care, and making use of infantile signals which activate this behavior. So as a translation, in the evolution of mammals, the practice of being attuned to one's young, sensing what they need and then giving it to them, was adaptive for survival. And so caring was evolutionary. Mammals birth babies that can't survive on their own. So in order for the species to survive, the parental figures had to be able to care. This book is fantastic, and he goes into the way that the meta meaning of all of this is something that is a cosmological, philosophical question. So it's not to say that care and love is just some random bio accident. Love has emerged. It is a present force on the planet. And just because we can trace how it started to show up in creatures doesn't mean that that's why it showed up. Love may have been pre-existing or may have been the driving force behind this whole process. We don't know. Just wanted to name and presence that. But basically, this quality of cherishing is that being like, oh, like, I love you, I'm here for you. You know, those are just words, but like physical gestures of care, and that comes from someone appearing infantile, so having distress, and that even as we age and we're no longer infants, that dynamic is still kind of wired into us. And this goes on. He also notes that what he calls the flight drive, the natural response of a startled animal to seek refuge with a conspecific, so it's the same species, particularly the most powerful conspecific available, is rooted in the child's rushing to its mother at the first sight of something unusual. Natural response of a startled animal to seek refuge with a conspecific, particularly the most powerful conspecific available. Our impulse to seek support and be of support runs deeper than our lifetimes, and even deeper than humanity. It is embedded into the evolution of mammals. I'm focusing on mammals here, and this is not to say that other groups of species don't exhibit care. Mammals give birth to offspring, which have to be nurtured and cared for a time, and these are offspring which are not ready to survive on their own, while they develop under the protection of more powerful and mature others. This underlying primordial dynamic is powerful, and it invites our development of maturity in learning how to navigate it. For one, being in distress and seeking support can induce love and connection. People who maybe run a little bit more of that energy that I was talking about, who are more reserved and like keep it together, actually, you know, in enough self-help literature and whatever, there's the teaching for people who are running that kind of energy that, you know, people want to love you, people want to help you, let people help you. And it actually builds investment and care in the connection. So that's even, it's deep. It's like in our evolution. So this bond goes deeper than the mind or the intellect because it's literally so primordial. On the other hand, disparities of power are complex and tricky and can be sites of abuse or abusive power. So more simplistically, vulnerability is this powerful connector, and a source of bonding and trust is important here. So do we trust who we're opening up to? Do we trust ourselves to be sovereign? Do we trust ourselves to be aware of our boundaries? And this is where I think, you know, we can really have empathy for this regulation process that happens with Cancer and Capricorn, because Cancer is so gooey and so emotional. It's where we are the most vulnerable. And there's an element of safety and trust that goes in even letting that be seen. Cancer and Capricorn are very protective archetypes, and they each have their own way of being guarded. So with Cancer, it's this hard crab shell that protects that soft, gooey crab on the inside. And with Capricorn, it's walls and boundaries and procedures that reduce access and availability. Sometimes our work is lessening these defenses that we have so we can be more open to life. And sometimes we are already plenty open to life, and the work is having these defenses and boundaries because we are worth protecting, essentially. And not everyone is going to respect our life force if we're just like open to have any exchange and any encounter with anyone, right? So there's that kind of regulation of boundary that we see with these archetypes. And though these dynamics explored above are highly relational and often involve two or more beings, these dynamics exist internally as well. So self-care, self-parenting, self-soothing, self-protection, etc. These are all ways that we draw upon these dynamics in our own being. And this can also be a way to avoid codependency or intense power imbalances in relationship, because if we are in a place of deep need to the point where there's a way that we are not able to take care of ourselves or be self-empowered, then we're more likely to accept something that's not the greatest deal or not the greatest arrangement because we need it so badly. And when we have a really strong capacity to take care of ourselves, then it raises our standards of how we're going to relate with others. And depending on the range at which we inhabit these themes, whether you're already kind of like an ocean of emotion and you're trying to get organized and move forward in some way, or figure it out, or, you know, whatever, or you're a little bit stiff and guarded and it's about feeling more emotion, you know, so there's that vacillation. But it's also about, are you the one who's always supporting other people and not receiving care for yourself, which actually from a professional standpoint, like in the work that I do, for example, because I help other people, I'm always asking for help from others. It keeps the chain of my capacity to be a soul worker and an astrologer strong and vital. I learn things directly through experience that I can then pass on. It increases my empathy. So I know a lot of you who are into astrology are, you know, into similar fields like healing and self-development. And maybe you're professional in that as well. Or maybe you're the person in your friend group who's always doing the emotional labor. So do you have ways that you go out and ask for support? And then likewise, if you're always asking for support, are you showing up in service too, if you have that capacity? In often ways, we all have something, not maybe in very extreme cases. So you may not be at an extreme, right? There can be some ambiguity or both andness and all of that, but checking in with this spectrum being very alive this week, and in what situations, what, where are you inhabiting this archetypal makeup? And in short, as we allow ourselves to be cared for and care one another, and do so in a way that's genuinely respectful of the humanity and other people, and people's boundaries and people's needs, all of that, we're increasing love and connection on the planet. And then on July 20th, 2020, there's a new moon in 28 degrees of Cancer at 10:33 a.m. Pacific. And this also coincides with the Sun in Cancer opposite Saturn at also 28 degrees of Capricorn. And this will happen later in the day at 3:28 p.m. Pacific. And this image is, of course, Frida Kahlo. This is our second new moon in Cancer in a row. The last one happened at 0 degrees, if you remember, and it was also an eclipse on June 20th. This lunation is opposite Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in late Capricorn, and trine Neptune in Pisces. The full moon ahead on August 3rd, so I'm skipping ahead for a moment because the full moon is always good context for what's starting at the new moon. The full moon on August 3rd is a peak moment of the lunar cycle that will begin with this new moon on July 20th. And the full moon will be on the Leo-Aquarius axis with the full moon in Aquarius, Sun in Leo. And Uranus and Taurus will be square the full moon axis. And this is just such a way different vibe than this new moon. It's so much more playful and kind of like inventive, whereas this new moon is more like emotional and feeling the pressure of our emotions. This new moon highlights the care and emotional axis, care and emotional labor axis of Cancer Capricorn. And this is due to the oppositions of Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in Capricorn. And that's a heavyweight lineup of planets opposite the Sun in Cancer. As the new moon occurs, we might feel emotional pressure due to anything that makes the animal inside of us run for safety. Regardless of how we are keeping it together or not, there is a lot of pressure signified in this transit. However, the full moon implies new freedom, paradigm shift, and even fun. And symbolically, we can be on a story arc right now of recognizing where we feel deeply pressured and oppressed by life, by our patterns, by the world, by the weight of our memories, by the weight of our minds, our anxieties, etc. Like, what is pressing down on us? And actually feeling that, and maybe not being able to not feel it as much as we normally would. And then through this, making a choice that we want something new and starting to be more open to innovation and play. Like, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to be this disempowered by my own mind or my own anxiety. And something opening up or making way at the full moon is my prediction. So again, and I've been saying this week after week, usually for some time, within this year, 2020, we're in this massive historic moment of contraction. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 2020 is like literally no joke. It's a big deal of a transit. And now with Jupiter involved for a triple conjunction as well. And even without the astrology, it is apparent how much fear, anxiety, and upheaval is present in the collective zeitgeist. It's probably important to acknowledge how you are feeling with the same compassion that you would offer a child, an upset child. Cancer craves emotional cohesion and attunement, emotional attunement like empathy. And however, our most intense emotions, so cue this opposition from Jupiter and Pluto in Capricorn, and Saturn, this can trigger our resistance and our desire to suppress and bottle up feeling. Sometimes not going there can be adaptive, like we can decide, I don't hold space for worry anymore in my reality. That's super powerful. There is a way to participate responsibly and well with reality without being scared and worried all the time. Being scared and worried doesn't make us better people. And there is a deep constriction within us sometimes that can feel like that's the way that we can be good. That's the way that we can make sure we avert danger. So learning how to have boundaries internally of spaces in our consciousness that we're not going to hold court for. Like, fuck being insecure, not down for it, like that can be something that we decide. And at the same time, sometimes it is suppression. So it's a careful, like, back and forth kind of thing. But by the full moon, you might anticipate that you could be coming up with some ideas to cheer yourself up or to liberate yourself from what feels oppressive or difficult right now. Not saying it can't happen sooner, but that the seeds for that paradigm shift or epiphany are starting with this new moon. So now is also tuning into this Neptune trine to the lunation, an important time to access or notice forgiveness in your field. And this may not be forgiveness that you have to force either. Forgiveness, I think, is often a choice, but sometimes forgiveness happens effortlessly. And it happens because we have an experience where it triggers a memory of being on the other side of that same experience. So maybe there's a way that we felt hurt by someone in the past, and then we're in a situation where we notice that we are hurting someone in the same way that we have been hurt. And we feel into the complexity of the situation or whatever it is, and our own fallibility or imperfection, and it humbles us and we get forgiveness because of it. And it's not something that we woke up and we're like, today I'm gonna forgive, but it just happens. Whoa, sorry, that was like a door from the wind. I wish I knew how to edit videos, because I would just edit out moments like that. But you guys just have to see it instead. Okay. On July 21st, 2020, Mercury in 9 degrees of Cancer squares Chiron retrograde in 9 degrees of Aries at 8:51 a.m. Pacific. And this image is by Uni Kaya. By the way, in the written version of these forecasts, I have links oftentimes to the artists if you want to go check out their work. I include the artist credits in the written version. So this alignment between Mercury and Chiron occurred on July 1st when Mercury was retrograde and Chiron was direct. And here's what I wrote then. So this is a repeat, but Mercury recently went direct, so some of its transits are happening again. And this is a tense transit, and it can correlate with inner confrontations of emotional states that we find uncomfortable and the inner call to action that emerges within our distress. The call to action could be a coping strategy that assuages the problem, or taking action to remove oneself from the situation that is an ongoing cause of distress. A little bit of crisis energy. And inflammation may be a useful image here. There is the issue itself and the puffy, tender energy around it. When we are encountering a problem or a difficult mental state, there is both the issue itself and the response to the issue, which is the inflammation, that we must tend to. The issue and the inflammation are different, however. Just as I said with that thing around anxiety, and there being a thing to be anxious about. So that is the circumstance, that's the problem. And then there's our massive, contracted, intensified response of all the things that we have to do and the vigilant, scared, guarded way that we have to live. Like that energy is a response. It's not the same as the problem. And sometimes the response is also part of the problem. And as an example, if we are finding ourselves afraid of something, there can be the pragmatic response and the fear at the most basic level, and the emotional tending to the psychological inflammation around the fear. And again, they are different. So that is what I have for you. And I want to share that I have openings for my ongoing mentorship work, which is helping you develop a deeper relationship to your natal chart over time and helping you work through certain goals and life transitions, where having like a mentor and a guide by your side during that could be really helpful, especially someone who can help you with your astrology and living out your natal chart to the fullest. And locating some of your blocks, your ongoing patterns in the natal chart, and learning how to work through those as well. I've also really taken to helping people with their creative projects and with their online presence or launching an online business. And there's a lot that goes into that in terms of personal development and the emotional component. So I've been really enjoying helping people reach their goals and begin their court that way with the tools that I have, like astrology. And I don't even talk about it this much on the YouTube channel, but the information that I come into contact with and share it's sourced from meditation and from seeing these lights that I work with. So the way that I tune into natal charts before meeting with clients is meditating on them and getting images, getting visions, and then sharing that. So that's kind of like the world that I live in by default, is like receiving visions and transmitting them. And I do this for the collective. I do it for people who watch these videos or read my forecasts, but I can also be in dialogue with you about your process and help you move around stagnant energy and get new ideas and be empowered in your situation. So I'd love to help you. I have space for new clients, and you can email me at sabrina@monarchastrology.com to set up a free consultation call. So go ahead and leave a comment. I recorded this under a conjunction between the moon and Uranus, and I feel that zany energy, feel that spontaneous energy here. So I hope that it was at least endearing. And let me know in the comments what resonated with you, what you're taking away, and how you're doing this week. Do you connect with this? Is this the experience that you're having? And if so, maybe what have you learned that's helping you stay emotionally grounded and nourished during this time of upheaval and a lot of activations? Because, part of this as well is not just that we're all like panicking and freaking out. There is that energy for sure. But there's a lot of deepening of character and discovering inner reserves of energy or power or wisdom that are coming through in this time also. So maybe you have some medicine, and I invite you to tune into what that is during these times. Thank you for tuning in, and remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for being here.